Let's go ahead and call to order the Finance Administration Committee. If City Clerk will note attendance, and we'll proceed forward with the approval of the agenda. Are there any revisions or alterations to the agenda as presented? All right, unless there are objections, the agenda is approved as presented. With that, let's open to public comments. Are there individuals present in the meeting room wishing to make comment before the committee on subject matters not currently on the agenda? If you when we get to the contract, we've got it on here too. Okay. With that, we'll close the open public comments. We'll move on to approval of the minutes dated July 16th, 2024. Are there any comments or revisions or questions regarding to the minutes? Chair has none. Me has none. Any objections to the approval of the minutes as presented? All right. The minutes are approved. Let's move on to approval of warrants claims reports. Consideration claims report dated August 12th, 2024. Chair has no following questions, nor have I seen any questions in email in regards to the warrants. Are there any questions from committee members in regards to any items on the warrants report? Right. Any objections to approving the claims report as presented? All right, we'll move forward with the claims report as presented and move it into council agenda. Still I'm going to swap if the attorney will forgive me. I'm going to swap the agenda, go into waste management. So potentially some of our audience can actually go into the line. So I can pull that up. All right, so we have the solid waste contract outline went out to bid. As you remember, it has come back to bid. This just went through Parks and Public Works review. Was the intent you were going to go through the presentation here also? You get 2 more council members to see it before council. It's a good idea.
Evening, council. Sorry. There you go. Thank you.
Don't this awful light.
So, as I mentioned, this I am bringing forward the final contract for the solid waste collection and with waste management. And as you'll recall, I brought this forward to you guys a handful of times now, and this is finally the final contract with the low bidder. And really, it's a pretty similar contract to what you've looked at previously with some of David Linehan's final touches on it. So anyways, and so the purpose of tonight is A, introduce you guys to this, get you familiar with this new contract, but then B, also get you guys to look at the alternatives that are an option with this contract so that you guys can make a decision on those alternatives next meeting or next council meeting. And so just a bit of background on this, just to jog your memory. You'll remember back in February, we decided to move forward with going out to bid for the new solid waste contract. That new solid waste contract starts June 1st, 2025, so that's next year. And so we had sent out the bids to the 4 haulers in this area. And the current contract with Waste Management was originally a 7-year contract, and it's had 3 2-year extensions. And this new contract is a 7-year contract with an option to renew twice, each for 1 year. And so a brief timeline of this whole process is preparing those RFP documents back in January, industry review and council review in March, releasing that RFP document in April. Bids were due in May. Since that time, we have been just doing contract finalization. And as I mentioned, that's really, there wasn't a whole lot of back and forth with the contract with that changed the meat of it. It was a lot of David Linehan's comments and Waste Management's lawyer going over that. And now in August, it's the council process to start the new contract June 1st, 2025. And so, as I keep mentioning, it's a pretty similar contract to what you've seen, which was a similar contract to what is existing currently. And so really, you're still getting the hauler reaching out and sending billing and annual mailers. As it stated right now, it's weekly garbage, recycling, and compost. It's supporting the city's mandatory collection enforcement. There's still holiday tree collection. There's still an inclement weather recovery schedule. They're still attending community events. And what is new, though, is that the collection trucks must be newer than 10 years in this contract. Low income / senior and disabled residents get a discount. There's premium dumpster service included. That's gate and lock fees that were previously additional fees. And there's unlimited commercial recycling, same a few big ticket items. So after we had put this out to bid, we got 3 bids back. As mentioned, Waste Management, the incumbent hauler, was the low bidder. And that bid is based on all of the rates combined, so their annual estimated revenue generated. So it's not a bid on a 32-gallon cart or a resident cart, it's for everything. And so that way we're comparing apples to apples. And at the end of the day, Waste Management was that low bidder, with the 2 other bidders being slightly higher, but it was still a competitive process. And so what are these new rates that we're going to be seeing? And so if you're looking at a residential 32-gallon garbage cart, just to make sure that we're easily comparing, that was $33.44, and the new contract rate is going to be $47.58. So that's about a 40% rate increase. Everything across the board is increasing, but that 32-gallon cart is the one that is highlighted. So what are some alternatives? These are the alternatives that we talked about when we were putting out the bid that we decided would be good items to add onto that bid, just so that we can compare and make a educated decision on how we want to move forward. And so those items was a no-cost annual bulky item. So that's being able to get rid of a single couch every year. I say couch, but it could be a refrigerator, whatever, a bulky item. As the contract stands right now, that's an additional fee. So you want to get rid of a couch, it's an additional fee. You call up Waste Management, you say, hey, I'm getting rid of the couch, and they'll send a truck to pick it up, but it costs X amount of dollars, depending on the item. For an additional $1.35 per resident per month, they could get rid of 1 bulky item a year. Another item that we looked at was doing every other week compostable collection. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Rather than weekly compost collection, it's every other week. And that is a savings of $3.25. And then the final item that we looked at was seasonal compostable collection. And so that is from those winter months when there's a lot less yard waste going into the bins, switching that to every other week. So they're still getting compost in the winter, it's just every other week as opposed to every week. Yeah, in order to help you guys make that decision and analyze it, here's a monthly compost usage throughout the year. And so you can see that there's pretty steady compost use throughout the year, but there's definitely a peak in May at 164 pounds per resident. That's per resident per month, I should make clear. And in February, there's a pretty deep valley of 66 pounds per resident per month. That's an average. Yeah.
When you say resident, do you mean household?
Household, yes.
Okay.
And that equates to about a 95-pound per month average, or 22 pounds per week on average in compost.
Councilman Johnson?
I'm guessing because it's not an option that you mentioned, it probably isn't, but is there a spring and fall option? So reduce the number or the amount of pickup during summer and winter, and then every other week for spring and fall.
There's not an additional spring fall option, but what I could say is alternative that's in the contract as it stands is that there's always the option to add additional yard waste bags to like the side of the trash can, and then you just get charged the extra fee for that.
Okay.
And so if it's a particularly heavy month, then you can as far as bulky items, in the year of 2023, about 21 bulky item requests came in, and so that's a resident calling in to get rid of their couch, and so only 21 items out of the whole city were called in, and that's throughout the entire year. And so what I am looking for you guys is I'm going to be moving this forward to next week's council of the whole, so I'm looking for the contract adoption. But further, I am looking for some guidance on how we want to move forward with those alternative options.
You back to the options page. So just to let you know, the conversation out of Parks and Public Works was for 21 items, putting $1 something across the board. Let's do the math. It's like $7,000 or $9,000 a month that's being collected to support this for 21 items. So the thinking was, no, let's not go after that. Had a pretty lengthy discussion on every other week through the year or every other week seasonally, being the winter months. You go every other week, in the spring, fall, whatever, or spring to fall, you go every week, because it seems to be, we're all mowing our grass at that stage. The committee kind of like just going every other week, year round. Feeling that those who have a tendency to have the levy loads, it's kind of an optional thing you've either got the yard or the garden or something that's driving that extra load that's yours. And you have the option to go ahead and add yard waste bags in. There'll be an additional fee, but at least then those that are heavy using it are at least getting that fee, not those who aren't using it every other week. So that was their thinking going in. Okay. I often put bags out anyway, so I'm probably not a good person to ask this question of. That way. Other discussion, other two items that are on there, we do have our 9% utility tax that's out there, but we do that on all utilities, and it fluctuates with whatever the cost of the service is. There is an administrative fee. There was some discussion. The administration fee also is a flat rate in compared to the service, but this is particular for administration of solid waste management. There was discussion with the jump of the rate going by 40%. That jumped 20%. And did our administrative fees really jump 20%? Be aware that there's nothing restricting those funds not to be used for other purposes, and there are constraints on general fund that could do that. But at least from my standpoint, that's administrative fee for waste management. Has that cost gone up to us, not the general fund overall? And I don't believe we've done a 20% jump in that cost in and of itself. Have no data, just grumpy. So what did I miss? Did I miss any other items we discussed?
Just one highlight. If there was somebody that really liked their compost and they use a ton of it, more than the average person, they are able to rent an additional cart.
Yeah.
So the contract as it stands, so we'll have to discuss with the waste management off this, it was about $8. But because we'd be switching to every other week, we'd have to go back to waste management and see if that $8 is still accurate for the additional cart, but you can assume it's going to be something like that.
Subscriptions?
So I'm sorry, I'm just trying to back up for a minute. So my concern is if we take compost to an every other week, because we want to incentivize people to be composting, right? We want it diverted out of the trash. And right now you pay for the size of the trash can. So for example, like my family of 4 has the smallest trash can that you can, and we try to compost everything we can. But if we start collecting compostables every other week, my concern then is that people will just either miss the pickups, forget which week it is, and they'll just be dumping it into the trash, right?
Right.
I worry about compliance dropping across the board and then sending that stuff to the landfill when it could be diverted to a better use, right? That's better for the environment. That would be, I guess, one of my concerns. And then just, having just the nature of the beast in terms of, this is food waste and other things that then will be sitting in people's hopefully garages and not attracting wildlife. But we're talking about having it sit there for longer and it's steaming pile of mess, which could lead to other
No, good points.
What's about
less desirable,
And the history was we jumped up the size of the compostable when we did this contract originally to encourage that kind of behavior. Okay.
Yeah, the other concern that I had with going to permanently 2 weeks is it's possible that there's a slight inequity between how compost is collected on the yard waste is collected on the ridge versus downtown. Reason that I say that is that much of the ridge, Snoqualmie Ridge landscaping is maintained either by the master HOA or by the sub HOAs. I think that there could be a smaller ratio of people on the ridge that do a lot of their own yard work versus downtown. Certainly depends on the yard.
Hold on. ROA does fairway and common areas, and they do their own yard waste. The yard waste at individual houses is responsibility of those individual houses, and usually,
Or sub HOAs.
no, well, I can't speak to the sub HOAs. There may be, but I'm unaware of any of those. Usually, if you have a lawn service at your house, they will utilize your yard waste to put their stuff in.
Could also be some
was kinda
differences
hoping they
between
call it, but
Snoqualmie
they-
Ridge 1 and Snoqualmie Ridge 2 as to how those all laid out. But anyway,
There may
This-
some of the you in the case of sub HOAs, they may be like for multifamily units and everything else. Yes, where they have a group service handling everybody, uh, and probably the cottages. But that's about it. I mean, it's limited to the smaller buildings and multi-use buildings, I believe. But good points. And again, that was just their discussion. This will go to council. We'll have this discussion again in council and hopefully give them final direction out of council next week. Councilman Johnson.
I can probably live with a decision to go with every other week compostables, but I think I would lean toward the seasonal compostable option
The one
for those
point-
reasons.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The one point that got made to me when we talked about seasonal compostables with the waste management professionals, but then also consultants who work with a ton of different cities, is other cities that have done that, there's been challenge with implementing or doing that switch. So when you switch from every other week, making sure that you get that message across and that all the residences are aware of that change. And then when it switches back to every week. And so it's certainly something that can be surmounted, but just it is a challenge yearly when all of a sudden we're switching to every other week and getting that message across and making sure that nobody misses their week that they're on and then accidentally having a month worth of compost.
Yeah.
This is anecdotal, but I can't tell you in unincorporated, it is every other week.
Do we have stats on, sorry.
Go ahead.
Do we have stats on how many folks are still utilizing the compost on that every other week or whether it decreases compliance?
I can give you anecdotal evidence from my neighborhood, and everybody seems to have it under control. In my family, we use the iPhone to tell us which color card to put out which week, because recyclables are every other week too.
Oh, really?
So
Yeah, I'm also in unincorporated Cook County, so I can speak to that a little bit. Is compost is an additional fee as well, so it wouldn't be compared to apples.
Having had one meeting to think, it's always dangerous. On several other utility stuff, we often get charts that says, here are comparable cities and where their rates are and where our rates are. Do we have that for? I gotta get back into Zoom and see it. All right.
And so again, that's the number that's highlighted there is weekly recycling and weekly composting. Sammamish is also weekly and weekly, but then North Bend is every other week. Also, Chair, I think we have a member.
Go ahead.
If I may address the council members.
Sorry, could you come up to the
Can we
microphone?
get up the mic and let's make sure we get it?
Thank you.
So I'm actually, well, I actually just got out of it, but I was on my HOA board. And so when we're talking about downtown, okay, I can tell you because I pull the yard waste down there, is downtown is actually the heaviest. That would be Wednesday service. That is actually the heaviest service day that we actually have, believe it or not. I want to say the route is made up of 1,200 customers. The split is basically up to, oh boy, I always call it Seahawk Park, down to the train tracks. Last week, that area was 3.2 tons, and it was about 8 tons down in downtown Snoqualmie. What happens, generally speaking, is when I'm looking at those numbers, they don't quite look accurate. We see a lot of landscapers really fill up the carts, as you had mentioned. So it actually happens quite often. And then when it comes to, I guess, the rodents, that's actually one of the main concerns that I actually hear from people. And it's because we do live in a greenbelt society or a community. When I would look at some of the things that we would have to handle at the board when we had our board meetings, is we actually had to spend quite a bit of money on pest control, believe it or not. And it's because people would have to leave their carts out, things of that sort. And it would always happen during the winter. I don't know if it's just the life cycle or whatnot, but food was stored outside. I've been in Snoqualmie long enough where I've seen the bears come and go several times. And that's probably the main function why people bring their carts out with little in it is get it outside of their house. We have a lot of, in the smaller areas in the ridge, the sub HOAs, a lot of them have rules about when the cart has to be out and where you can see it. So it can't be on the side of the house, it has to be in the garage. So it's not uncommon that we see people last minute running out with a little green bag, hucking it in there. And it kind of cracks you up because it's a pizza box and a bag, right? But I would say that Snoqualmie residents are actually very good about separating stuff. And it keeps the pests down because we see it when I go out to those county routes. You're talking about the unincorporated. If you look at all those lids, they're chewed up by squirrels. We have to write them up all the time. It's really a pest control thing. So just kind of adding to that, that's what I see out there.
That's helpful. Thank
So,
you.
and after COVID, the numbers actually jumped out outrageously. There's certain conditions that we actually have to drive to keep the neighborhood safe. And the trucks get very heavy. Yard waste is actually the heaviest commodity out here. Yeah, that's what I see.
So that's what having real soil in your yard does. Downtown versus the ridge. Sorry. Okay, interesting. Dr. Johnson.
So this is helpful to see a little bit of cost comparison. It's a little small. A few other cities. I don't think that we're the only city that has contracts with waste management. It's just because those are much older relative to ours, and so therefore wouldn't really be a useful comparison. Or I don't know who Issaquah uses, but there's got to be someone else who uses waste management.
Oh, sure. So the reason that we chose these cities is because they have a recent contract, right? So if we didn't want to compare somebody to a city that was on a contract from 6 years ago, because then they haven't seen that major price hike that everybody else has seen. And then also when you get into the much more dense areas, the rates also go down. And so if you really want to, it's just not apples to apples in that comparison. So that's why these cities were chosen. That being said, I'd be happy to add a couple more cities by next week, and I'll try to find ones that are comparable.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also knowing that every contract is different, so it's never apples to apples, but it's close. Is what we're going for. Highlighting the major differences being, every other week or weekly. Recycling.
Any other questions? Drew's anxious to get up here and talk. Oh, yeah.
Piqued my interest with one statement that you made earlier. So I just want to make sure that I do my due diligence.
Okay.
You mentioned a 21% increase in the admin fee. Please keep in mind that this contract starts June 1st, 2025. So if we're going to potentially see rate increases of 42%, for example, we would expect our revenues to track that. So that 21% represents the half of 2025. And then you'd likely see the same sort of percentage again for 2026 once we have a full year in effect. So just keep that in mind.
So that's only a half year increase.
It's only a half year increase, correct? Now, certainly, you know how I would argue, right, the point, for the most part, that we have a general fund that is impacted by inflation over time, in which we have a property tax dependent community where roughly 40 to 50% of our general fund revenues are property taxes, in which we can really only increase 1% annually unless there's some sort of new construction or we're prepared to go out to the voters. And so this is a revenue option that's kind of before you for the most part that would keep up with inflation over time because it does increase at the rate of CPI. For the most part. And so I just want to keep that in mind. We've been moving towards trying to get away from property taxes and diversifying our portfolio. This is one of those mechanisms that can certainly help along that pathway. And certainly we've got the public safety sales tax up for a vote tonight too. So anyway, thank you. And that's it.
Go ahead. All right, so with that, that'll go to council and we'll see this presentation again, have discussion again with full council. If you guys want to escape, I understand.
Nice to meet you all.
All right, with that, those are the agenda bills. Discussion item number 5, model training museum. Get a package.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's back up. Let's do this. I switched them and I did that. So let's go to agenda bill 2487, Second Amendment Agreement, interim city attorney legal services. Who wants to talk to this one?
I'm going to start, and it may become a team effort, but so for your consideration is a long-term agreement for city attorney legal services. We've been using Madrona on a temporary basis for about 18 months now. We now have some numbers to see how the usage is going, et cetera. We're averaging about a $25,000 a month bill for Madrona. And we compared that to previous in-house numbers, which with just the 2 attorneys, not including their support staff, worked out to be about $40 or $40,000 a month, not $40 a month, $40,000 a month. So this contract would reflect a savings of approximately $15,000 a month. Um, So any questions? I'm sure Drew can talk to the budget statement. I'm not even going to attempt to do that. In here, it is a two motion agenda bill. And that is because we need to do a second amendment to the original amendment, raising it up to 352,000 because there was a delay in getting the permanent agreement here that I'll take responsibility for. So we're changing that from 295 to 352 to cover the last 2 months.
So I guess I'm confused at that stage. The title is Second Amendment to Interim City Legal Services.
And that was the title up until Monday morning when we figured out that this was a much more complicated agenda bill and we had to rewrite it. So there's a handout at your place. And the title is now City Attorney Legal Services.
Go ahead, Councilman Johnson.
I understand the financial savings, which is awesome. The concern that I have is the difference in the quality of service, which me, as someone who is not in the field of law, I cannot speak to. It is one that I am just asking about, which is how does having a contract with a law group to provide the legal services to the city, where they're doing other things as well that take their time and attention and those kinds of things, which are completely natural. That's what their job is to do the things that they're doing. How does that compare to having an in-house attorney who is only focused solely on the affairs of the city?
So, hold on. I'm not necessarily sure I want us to get into that discussion in open meeting.
Is that something
Can
that's
we
a session
add
appropriate?
an executive session to the council meeting, particularly to talk about contract options for legal services? Yeah. You may have a biased opinion, but yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, this is really delicate and I don't really want to speak to something that really is a contract with my own law firm. So I have to be very careful with what I actually say. I mean, I'll always be direct and honest and straightforward, but I just probably need to be a little careful and understand where I'm coming from. Your executive session would allow you to have an executive session to evaluate the performance of a city employee, or in this case, a contractor, which is basically sort of functioning as a city employee. Just to talk about contract terms, not so much, unless you think I'm going to sue you if you don't. If you don't renew my contract, which I can assure you we will absolutely not be suing you. So, you know, unless you're worried about legal risks associated, that's what you would need to have an executive session about. And it would be, for that kind of an executive session, you actually have to have an attorney present, and I'm not sure you would want me present in that discussion. So just advising you that that could be a complicated executive session to try to put together.
Let's have the discussion. No, my personal opinion is I want an attorney on staff. I've had several occasions where he tries, but occasionally it's like, I need to go review that before I voice opinion. Where my past experience with an attorney who's on staff and assigned, they know it, they live it, they often know, oh yeah, that we did that 10 years ago and that's over here. Okay. So, and I've had benefit of two, I'll call one really long-term attorney and one medium attorney during service. I don't remember how long Pat Adderson served as our attorney. It was a long time. and I think just having them on staff, there's some benefit in that they've lived through it. And if they have spare time, they go research something or whatever. Whereas if he has spare time, he has other contracts to work on. Okay, so I'm at the interim stage. I want a staff attorney. I don't know how you guys feel. Go ahead.
Not that I was on the council for very long with our previous attorney, but while I was, I feel like I noticed a difference as well. And again, that's not to say that current council isn't doing the best that they possibly can, but it is within that framework of being under a contract where there are other things going on. If I was pulled in 10 different ways, then I would perform as though I was being pulled in 10 different ways. So I am in agreement. I would like to have someone on staff based on, again, just my personal experience with the services that we've had. That's all I have to look at.
I'm kind of in agreement as well. I want to be very clear that you've been an excellent city attorney and I appreciate all the hard work. But I do think that it's helpful to have somebody who's physically on site and here, 4 or 5 days a week to make sure that as issues arise, they're here and we'll be able to see them coming because they are involved in all of the meetings. Director level. So I think that it would be helpful. I think again that this has been great thus far, but I would like to see us move in a direction where we had council on site.
So does administration, we'll move forward either way, have the discussion. Do you want to move forward with an interim change or do you want to move forward with change to try to go full time with the rest of the council?
I think we should pull this back and the mayor and I need to meet.
I will add that there is definitely, City Attorney Linehan does a great job.
Oh, yeah.
Says, right?
No argument.
And in your, we're not going to get someone that's been here for 10 years, right?
Agreed.
That was the experience that we've all had. We don't want someone speaking off the top of their head about some document. We want them to review it and provide that information. And Madrona Law provides his expertise in other areas as well. So that's something that we're benefiting from with Madrona as well. We'll pull it and have further discussion.
Okay. Oh. Let's work it. Sure. I really didn't want to have that conversation. But anyway, all right.
Sorry, I put it out there.
No, you obviously had shared feelings. All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and take that one and table that for now. Yeah, we'll go ahead and reconsider. With that, let's move on to discussions. And first item up for discussion is model train. We got the little engine that could warn peace here.
Yes, so the intention tonight is just to introduce you to the documents, provide you with an opportunity to go home for 2 weeks, review them, bring back questions, have us answer questions, provide you with another 2 weeks of review. And then maybe we'll think about taking action on it. So there's no pressure, there's no rush. I wanted to get this to you early so that you had a long time to go through your deliberative process. Yes.
Go ahead, Councilor Johnson.
All right. Based on past experience, like number one question is amongst local interested organizations and groups and things, who has been provided with appropriate public facing documents?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Are you asking if the documents are public or not?
I suppose that'd be one
These
question.
are
Yes.
draft documents.
That'd be a yes or no.
So these were provided by Mr. Hambling's attorney as initial drafts. We've been going back and forth on drafts. I advised him that these were going to be shared with the council at a public meeting, and so they would be public as soon as they were part of this meeting. So as of now, they are no longer hidden. They are in public view.
Okay, then, sorry, follow up.
Follow up?
All right, then to clarify, have these gone to, the two groups I can think of being, the most potentially impacted and interested would be the Northwest Railway Museum and the Snoqualmie Tribe.
No, they've been shared with council.
Okay.
We do have an introduction if you'd like us to go through it.
Of course, yeah.
So this kind of follows along on that first page summary that you have in there. The text is the same except for one small little change that I added because I really couldn't whittle those words down any smaller. And the change I added is that there's a 3-year period where the property would be made available to the applicant to go raise the funds to do the project before it would revert back to city ownership. Well, it actually doesn't even transfer out of our ownership for that period, but there's a 3-year period to prove that the project would be viable.
Wait a minute, you turned your head in the middle of an important statement. So for that 3-year interim period, that property remains the city's.
Correct.
I don't want to go
And
through.
I'm gonna turn it over to David to go through the complicated
Okay.
Yeah, so
flow chart. which
there-
is page
there's
2.
there's I guess there's a couple things you should keep in mind. The development agreement is sort of the hub. If you picture a hub and spokes, the development agreement is sort of the hub that everything turns on. But because the development agreement has as exhibits all of the related documents that have to be executed before the whole transaction goes into effect. So the development agreement, if approved, has with it multiple exhibits, which are listed on
Somewhere.
page 8 under Article 1. You'll see there's the other related agreements that are reflected in the flow chart that you got. But the development agreement is essentially the terms by which all the other transactions will eventually kick in. So once the development agreement is signed, then the city has an obligation to convey its 2 parcels to the foundation. But that obligation doesn't actually get triggered until the foundation has shown that it has raised the funds, has presented a design and a budget that the council and that the mayor has approved. Their donors look legitimate and their budget looks legitimate. And then once all that is firmed up, they have the money and we're ready to issue a notice to proceed. That is what triggers the conveyance of the property to the foundation. So you hold on to the property until they're ready to stick the shovels in the ground. Once they're ready to stick the shovels in the ground, Peter's the Hamblings 2 parcels and the city's 2 parcels get conveyed to the foundation. It becomes foundation property so that they can actually build the museum on foundation property. If anything happens in that period before the shovels are ready to go in the ground, that would be considered a project failure, meaning something turns up with the site and the site can't be used, or they're not able to raise the funds, or you can't agree on a design, or whatever happens along the way. If a project failure is triggered, then you don't ever convey the city's property. He doesn't ever convey his property to the foundation. He doesn't convey the train itself and all the related stuff that forms the contents of the museum. That all stays his private property. So you've got all this time that you're kind of getting to the point where, okay, we agree this museum is ready to be built. And at that point, the triggers for deeds to be exchanged and all that kick in.
Thank you. So I have a few just questions off the top of my head. So first of all, who reviews the design?
So because it is a structure, it's just like any other building in the city. There'll be planning department review of the plans and landscaping and design review board and all of that. So there's that administrative level of review. But there's also sort of the ultimate sign off from the mayor that they've shown that they, that the design meets the terms of the development agreement. So the development agreement has one of the exhibits is a preliminary design. So before you would approve the development agreement, you would have a chance to see what the preliminary design concept looks like, what the preliminary budget looks like, what the schedule looks like. All that are exhibits to the development agreement. So you all would have that. The development agreement would have all the things, all the boxes they have to check. And so then you're relying on the administration to make sure that they checked all the boxes before they sign off and say, yes, this is ready to go to construction.
But to specifically answer your question, a planning commission would have final design approval.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's,
currently.
And so that would be the body that, because I'm assuming that would be a quasi judicial. Okay, so, yes,
so yes and no. There are so the planning commission is evaluating it based on what's in your code. So all the things they have to satisfy for code. But just in terms of like, what does this look like? What are the things that we want it to be in this museum? How do we want it to sit? Those are all things that you get to establish those in the contract. So your administration would have to make sure that those elements were satisfied. So it's really kind of a two-tier thing. It's like the planning commission is reviewing for compliance with code. Your administration is reviewing for compliance with what you've agreed to in the contract.
Keep going. You gotta follow up, I think. I'll get you next.
so, and when, I guess, I'm assuming that there will be environmental reviews somewhere in the process, right? At what point would those be done?
Well, the property has received a no action letter from Department of Ecology when the city acquired the property years ago. So there's already been a determination that there's no like contamination or anything like that on the property. Since this is just a building permit, I mean, ultimately it's just sort of civil and building stuff. You'd have to ask Emily if there would be any SEPA review required at that stage. Probably not, but.
Kind of depends on the project and what they're gonna do.
Yeah, if they're gonna do something that requires, I mean, obviously there would be review to make sure that, your temporary erosion and your erosion control measures and all that kind of stuff is done. All that stuff is just part of the building permit process, but it wouldn't be like a separate environmental review.
Okay. I'm just thinking because of its location and proximity to the river as well as the park.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if it's within the ordinary high water mark that would trigger, it's outside of that.
No,
Yeah,
within
so
the
it would trigger that. Yeah, so.
I do think there's something like a 60-foot buffer.
Yeah, there's setbacks.
Yeah, so that kind of stuff. And then in terms of, there's a very important thing that I thought you said about in the contract, the design parameters that we agree to. That means that essentially there will be a description that may or may not have exhibits and that show kind of what the design looks like. And that would happen before council has voted to approve the development agreement. Administration would say, yeah, you're building the thing that looks like the picture. Okay. And then planning commission would say, and this meets code. There could be perhaps variances or something they look for that they might request, who knows? But if they did, would those also go to planning commission?
Well, when the planning commission does design review, they will have input as to whether or not, oh, you didn't put the trees in the right place, or these are the wrong, whatever the types of things that they would evaluate any commercial construction project for. They would make sure that it meets all the city code requirements for, unless the council were to grant, unless there was a variance process requested.
Right.
Then there's a variance, that goes through your, and I think that goes to your building examiner, but.
Oh, actually, one small thing. When the lots are combined to allow for there to be the one building on the site, would those lots actually be combined into now being a single lot, or would they remain being 4 separate lots?
You'd want them combined into a single.
Well, they may do lot line adjustments. That's kind of up to the owner at that point.
Okay.
Whatever works best. Like you can move lot lines out of the way so you have one big lot. That you're building.
Okay.
Sometimes there's an advantage to doing that. So talked about site assembly and dedication, and we talked about development agreement. Operations, it'd be a public use covenant for 50 years. And the same one that was required earlier when we were discussing earlier. And then the city's requirements for development, construction, and operation of the museum at the earlier site are also carried forward in the current development agreement and public use covenant. And then there's also red line versions in your packet to demonstrate that.
Can you give me definition of public use covenant?
So the public use covenant, it's a separate document. It's one of your packet materials. That is essentially taking place of what used to be a lease. Before, all these covenants, all these requirements of things they had to do to operate this museum in a publicly beneficial way were part of the lease terms. But now, since they're not going to be leasing city property, they're going to be owning property. We're not going to give them that property unless all those same public benefit requirements are included as a condition of the deed of the property. So this public use covenant goes along with, it's something that be recorded on the title to the property that would say you have to comply with all of these restrictions on how you use the property during that 50-year term.
We'll be bringing this forward to the next FNA and looking forward to lots of questions.
Has the packet gone out to the other council members as well?
It has.
Okay, thank you.
All 7 council members have it.
Some didn't get an envelope to put it in, but
One didn't get an
Some
envelope. Get you an envelope.
Okay, any other questions or comments, or we've got some reading to do?
Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'm always available by email and phone. I'm always happy to get on a call. If any questions, you don't have to wait for a council meeting. In fact, it's often better than not because it's hard for me to give advice in a public setting or on the fly. So it'd be great if reach out and try to get all your questions answered as best as I can.
Upcoming agenda items, this was informational only, not for discussion. And then let's review the draft city agenda,
Which is also a handout.
which is in your handout. So we're the affordable housing workshop or roundtable is canceled.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll start at 7 p.m. Call to order, pledge of allegiance, agenda approval, hearing presentations. We'll have a discussion about fire department accreditation. That's a presentation, okay? And proclamation. And public comments, requested items for items not on the agenda. Right now, we have on the consent agenda, approval city council meeting minutes, approval of claims report. Yeah. Okay, no ordinances. We'll move on to committee reports, public safety, or fire department annual report. Community development has no items at this stage. Parks and Public Works will have amendment to the contract for parametrics for design of 384th Avenue sewer sidewalk. And resolution awarding waste management 2025 waste contract. We just saw the presentation. We'll see it again, have more discussion. If F&A, we will have, no, we won't. So the amendment to the attorney comes off and we'll bring that back here in 2 weeks thereabouts, or however long you need. Okay, and with that, we'll move to committee of the whole, the mayor's report, commission committee liaison reports, department reports. We'll have an executive session, potential executive session pursuant to yada yada. That's just a placeholder at this stage.
No, there's one.
There's one, all right. And then adjournment. Other than the executive session, we may get home before 10 o'clock.
There's one potential litigation.
Any other questions, comments, or additions to what was presented, what I just read? All right, any objections to it? All right, we'll move forward with the agenda as discussed. All right, with that, we are into adjournment. I move to adjourn. Anybody object?
Second.
Second. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.